Hello YouTube, welcome back to the channel. So in today's tutorial, we're going to be going over SQL in 1 hour. So in 1 hour, I'm going to go ahead and introduce you to SQL. So if you don't know what SQL is, don't worry, then this is the whole point of this tutorial. So SQL is just a language that is used to talk to databases. It's just a set of commands that you can use to create databases, insert stuff into the database, delete stuff, query stuff, and all that functionality. So in this tutorial, we're going to go over and learn all the basics of SQL. We learn how to install, get SQL Server installed on the machine, how to use Workbench editor to write SQL code, and I'll explain to you how to perform different functionalities such as creating a database, inserting data into the database, reading the data out, updating data, deleting data, and doing all that functionality in SQL. And I promise we'll cover this in 1 hour or less than 1 hour. If this video exceeds 1 hour, then that's bad. That's on me. But I aim to do this just in 1 hour. So introduction to SQL. So what is SQL and all of that? So before we begin that, let's take a look at the course outline. So I divide this course into 4 main parts. So the first main part will be the basic terminologies, where we go over the basic terminologies. What is a SQL, different primary key, what's the secondary key, and if you know all of this, we'll go over all of this in the terminologies part. And then after we are done, we're going to look at the downloading and setting up MySQL server and MySQL workbench on your machine. And then we'll look at how to perform CRUD functionality, such as reading data from the database, creating data or inserting data into the database, updating data and deleting data from the database. And then finally, we'll look at the ending remarks, so we just talk about the conclusion, and that's all. Okay, so let's first begin by talking about the different terminologies. Okay, so we'll look at the basic terminologies, and we'll start by looking at what is SQL. So SQL stands for the structured query language. Some people call it SQL or SQL, whatever you feel comfortable calling it. It's just for a language that is used to access data, to create databases, to access data, to support software applications such as, for example, if you go on Twitter, they have all the information. If you write a tweet, that tweet needs to get stored somewhere, right? And then later the tweet needs to be queried and displayed to you back, right? So all that is done using databases, and to the databases, to work with databases, we use the SQL language, which is a query structure, structured query language. Okay. So now that we look at SQL, which is just a language that is used to talk to databases to write your different software applications. Okay, so we have a database, and now we know that SQL is a language that is used to talk to that database. Okay, so now let's look at the database. Database is an organized collection of structured information or data, typically stored electronically in a computer system. So I got this definition from Oracle Kenya. So documentation. So thank Oracle Kenya for that. So the database is just an organized structure, the structure of data. For example, if you have tweets of people, right, you can just store the tweets randomly. You need to store the tweets in a table like order, where you have the names of the person who made the tweet, the content of the tweet, the date it was created, and all of that in a well arranged manner. So in a well organized manner. And if you have such data arranged in a well organized manner, we call that a database. Okay. So how does a database relate to SQL? So you might be wondering, okay, we have a database, which is a collection of well-organized data, and then we have SQL, which is used to talk to databases. So how does a database relate to SQL? So basically, we have data that is organized, and we need a way to manipulate the data, add new data to it, delete existing data, and we do all of that using SQL. So we talk to database using SQL. So SQL is just a set of different commands that you can use to talk to our database, and these commands are divided into 4 main sections. So we have the DDL, which is the data definition language. We have the data manipulation language, and then we have also the data control language, and then we have we have the TCL. Okay, so we have all of these different commands that can be issued to a database to perform different action. So for example, we can use the create command to create a database using the data definition language. We can use the drop command to drop a database. You can use truncate. We can use the select to select a given row from a database, right? We can use the insert method to insert data into a database. You can use the update method to update data from a data in a database, and also you have the delete method. Okay. So now that you look at that, let's look at take a look at what is a database management system. So database management system is a program that controls controls the creation, maintenance, and use of a database. So when we have a program that controls the creation, the maintenance, and the use of a database, we call it a database management system. We also have something called the relational database management system. And relational database management system manages stores the data into the collection of tables, which is related by common fields basically. So we have data that is stored into tables that is related by different columns. So we can use those columns to track data in different tables of our database. For example, we have the SQL server, and that's an example of a relational database management system. Okay. So now that you have looked at the data set a relational database management system, let's move on and look at how do we set different rules in SQL, because SQL is just a set of rules, commands that we use to talk to our database, right? Like use it to retrieve data, to update data, and do all that functionality. So let's look at the different ways we can set those different rules or commands. So let's look at how we can set the rules in SQL. So SQL we use to set the rules in SQL. We're going to use something known as constraints. So constraints are used to set the rules for all records in the table. So they are defined when creating our database. You can set those rules as, like, for example, the number of characters, maximum number of characters that we can allow for a given column. So let's say that you have a user's database which has the username, and then let's say the user's first name, and then the user's last name, right? So we can use S constraint to specify like how many characters a username can be. Maybe you don't want a username more than 20 characters. That would be extremely long, right? So we can control all that functionality using constraints. And yeah, that's basically what constraints are. So let's look at the major constraints in SQL. So we have the primary key constraint, we have the foreign key constraint, we have a null not null constraint, and we have many other constraints. So let's look at the primary key constraint, because in here I'm just going to look at the basic important stuff, because we're going to be doing this just a quick introduction to SQL. So I won't be covering all the constraints. I'm just going to look at the key important ones. So let's look at what's a primary key is. So uses one or more than one column to uniquely identify each row. So whatever the information that we use to identify each row uniquely, we call it a primary key. Okay, so a primary key is just used to identify each row inside of a database uniquely, and that's what the primary key is. And let's look at what a foreign key is. So a foreign key is a primary key that is used instead of another table. So let's say we have two tables, right? We have a users table, and then we have the tweets table. For example, let's say, like, imagine a Twitter application, right? So we have the users table, which contains the users information, and then we have the tweets table, which contains the different tweets that users make, right? So we have an ID field instead of the users table, and the ID field can be used to link each tweet to a specific user. So instead of the tweets table, we can also have another field there called a column, basically called a user ID, or users ID, and then we can link that users ID of the users table to the users ID of the Twitter table, of the tweets table. So for example, if the user ID is 20 and we have a tweet which whose users ID is also 20, then means that the user 20 is the one who created that specific tweet, and that's what the foreign key basically is. So it's just a primary key of one table that is used inside of another table to uniquely link the two tables. Okay, so now let's look at what a not null constraint is. So this is used to enforce the rule such that a column in a row is not left blank or empty, or not left blank or empty. That's what the null constraint is. So if we want to insert data into a table, you can use the null constraint to make sure that it is not empty. Okay, you can also use the unique. This constraint is used to ensure that each row and column has a unique value. So whenever each row and column has a unique value, then we can use this constraint to specify that each that specific column be unique. For example, let's say that we have a name column, right, which is going to store the user's name. So we want the user's name to be unique. There can not be two rows having the same username, right? For example, if you go to Twitter, your username is unique and only unique to you. Nobody else can copy your username, right? So to implement such a feature, you use the unique constraint to make sure that, hey, whatever information that is going to be entered inside of this column should be only unique values. And that's what the unique constraint can help us to do. Okay, so now let's look at the data types used in SQL. So there are different data types that you can use in SQL. There are a lot of them. You can use strings, integers, and so on. I'm not going to cover all of them since this is a quick introduction to SQL. So I'm going to leave this link where you can click on it and then get information to the post, which it documents the different data types used in SQL. But in this tutorial, we'll just look at a few of them. So let's look at the data types inside of SQL that you can use in SQL. So we have the numeric types, which is as integers, big int, decimal, small int, tiny int, and all of that. We have character types such as var character, character, text. We also have the date time information that can be called like date, date time, the date offset, and all that information. So integers, the int data type. Let's look at the numeric data types. The numeric data types, we have int, and int can be used to store only integers. So you can store floating point numbers whenever you use the data type of int. So you can have a column maybe called user ID, and that user ID can be of type int, meaning that the user ID will be only int values and not any other numeric type. Okay, we can have decimals, big int, and all of that. Also characters, we can have character char, which is just for you to store a single character. We can have variable varchar, which is variable length character, meaning that, for example, let's say that we want to have a user's name, right? And the username, maybe the maximum username the maximum characters inside of a username maybe is 20. So you can say var character and set it to be 20, meaning that no username can exceed the number of characters that you have set using the var character. And we'll look at this more in depth. You can also use text to store a lot of data and all of that information. For the date time, it clearly self-explanatory. The date, you can use it to store date information. The date time, you can use it to store date along with its corresponding time. And also the time is used to set only specifically the time of a given event. Okay. So now that you have looked at all of that, now go ahead and simply learn how to install MySQL on your machine, and also install MySQL Workbench on your machine, so we can begin to write SQL code and learn how to create the database, insert data into it, retrieve the data, and all the CRUD functionalities involved in SQL. Okay, so I'm going to be using MySQL for this. So you can go to this website and read more about it. So to install, I have all the information right here to install this. So I have the information to install MySQL on Windows. I have it to install it on a MacBook. If you're using a MacBook, you can find all the details on how to install it on a MacBook. And if you're using maybe on a Linux, you can find all the information on how to install MySQL or MySQL server on a MacBook, and all of that information. Okay. Yeah, so that's basically what I wanted us to do. And also we will need a text editor to edit our code. So we need to use, I'm going to be using MySQL Workbench, and you can download it from this link right here. I'm going to leave all these links inside of the description. So based on the operating system, just follow the instructions as per your operating system. So if you're using Windows, follow this instruction. If you're using MacBook, follow this instruction. If you're using a Linux machine like I am doing right now, then you'll be following this instruction. And then all of us, everyone, no matter the operating system, you need to have an editor, and you'll be using MySQL Workbench, and this is the community edition. You can just download it from here. Okay, so make sure you just specify your operating system. For example, if you're on Linux, you can just click on this and then simply go ahead and install it from here. Okay, one more tip: if you're using Linux, you can also get MySQL Workbench on the Linux Ubuntu software store without having to go through this process. So if you're using Linux, then it's a plus for you. You can just go to the Ubuntu software store and then simply download it from there. Okay, so good. So once we have all of that done, I hope that everyone has the MySQL server installed on the machine, and also my MySQL Workbench installed. Okay, if you don't, the links are going to be in the description. So okay, let's just move on, and I assume that you already have all of that already installed. So now let's go ahead and learn how to performing CRUD functionality. So what does CRUD stands for? So CRUD stands for create, read or retrieve, update and delete. So create, retrieve, update and delete. That's the long form of CRUD, and this is commonly used in databases because that's the most common operation of databases, right? So that's why we're covering it in this course, which is an introduction to database management system and all of that. Okay, so that's basically what you're going to be doing. So let's look at the different operations that we can perform inside of the CRUD. So the first one, which is the C in CRUD, stands for creating. So we're going to learn how to create a database. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm just going to go ahead and simply go in here and simply open up my Workbench. So make sure that you have your Workbench open. So just click on that, and this should open or pop up. Workbench should pop up here, and then I can just click. So you type in the password that you use to whenever setting up your server. So I'm going to type in my password right here. Okay, I got the password wrong. So let me just repeat the password again. So the mic is a bit in front of me, so just bear with me. Okay, so I don't know why it's failing to log in. So let me just type this out again. Okay, so now I'm able to log in, and if once you log in, it will be like this. But I just edited mine. That as you can see, the out edges are black, and then the inner is white. But in your case, it will be white all over. Okay, so this is basically where we are right now. So you can see I have all these databases right here, listed right here. So you can see all the databases listed here, right here. So how can you access all this information of all the available databases on your server or on your MySQL? Using the code. So we can just press Control and then the mouse wheel to just zoom in. So I just zoom in so that you guys can see. So I'm just going to go in here and just simply say show data basis, just like this. So that enters with semicolon. So every statement in MySQL ends with a semicolon, right? So just like you have C++, Java, and all of that, we are also here, we end the statements with we had lines of statements with semicolons. Okay, so once I want to go ahead and now run this, and this should now show me all the databases I have inside of my system. So to do this, just select this and then simply click on this right here. So click on this, and this is going to run this. If you hover on it, you can see it's giving you execute the statement under the cursor. And also we have this one right here which executes the whole statement. So if you have multiple lines written here and you want to execute all of them, you can just use this. But if you just want to execute a single line, just bring your cursor to where that line of code is, and just simply hit this arrow, this button right here, and it's going to run that specific line. So this is going to return to us all the available databases instead of our system. So you can see I have the information schema, MySQL database, performance schema, we have the student DB, the systems, we have the tutorials DB, and we have all of that information. Okay, so I just created all of this in the last tutorial. When I was working, when I use my databases, I use some of these databases, so that's why I have them here. So you have access to all of this information right here. So some of this like system schema, MySQL, all of these are just for the MySQL core operations. So they're not your database that you create yourself. But these are databases that pop up here are databases that you create yourself. Okay, good. So once I have this done, let's go ahead and simply learn how we can go ahead and create our own database, because right now we are able to see all the databases inside of our system, and we can be able to perform different actions using those specific databases. So how can I go ahead and make sure that I'm able to execute code and run my own code? So to do this, what I'm going to go ahead and do is you're going to learn how to create a database, right? Learn how to create a simple database, and then learn how to execute different queries on our specific end database. So let's go about. Let me just go back to the slides right here. So I go back here. So we need to go ahead and the first step is to create a database. So let's go back and learn how to create that database. So I'm just going to go back to Workbench, MySQL Workbench. So once I'm in here in MySQL Workbench, what I want to go ahead and do is simply learn how to set up our database. So now we have been able to show all the database inside of our system. We can create our own database and decide to use that database. So let me just go ahead and show you how to create your own database. So to create that, I'm just going to say create. And one thing you notice is that I'm using capital letter for some keywords. So all the keywords inside of my SQL, they're typically written in upper cases. But even if you write them in lower cases, you're not going to get any error. But mostly you find people writing them in upper cases. So I'm just going to go ahead and follow that convention and writing everything in upper cases. Okay, so once I have this, I'm going to simply say create a database if not exists, and then we pass in the name of our database. Let's call it tutorial. So I'm going to say YouTube. So we say YouTube YT and then tutorial database, just like that. So we have the YouTube tutorial database you're just going to create. So this can be anything that you want to call your database. Feel free to call anything that you want. So let me just explain to you what you have done in this line. So we say create database. So it's going to go ahead and create a database. So you can go ahead and actually just pass in the name of the database right here. You can just go ahead and sorry, let me just undo that. So you can just go ahead and pass in the name of the database directly in here. So you can just say create database and then the name of that specific database that you want to create. But you can also go ahead and simply say if not exists. So if not exists will create a database if it doesn't already exist. If it exists, then it won't create a database. Okay. So the reason why I'm using this is to avoid any errors or warnings that we'll get whenever the database already exists. So in this case, if the database exists, then our program will just keep over it instead of throwing at us an error, and that's what the if not exist does. Okay. So let's go ahead and simply run this again. Go ahead and simply run this. So once we run it, now we can see our database has been successfully created right here. So you can read it at the bottom right here. Okay. So once I have this, I can simply go in here and then refresh. Now you can see the database has popped up here, and that's what we have it right here. So now if I go back ahead and simply run this line again, I'm not going to get any error. I'm just going to get a warning that says that the database already exists. But if you remove this right here, you might get an error saying the database already exists. So that's why we keep that statement if not exist. Okay. So feel free to use if not exist, or you can feel free to remove it. But mostly it's a good practice to use that on your code. Okay. So once we have that done, now we can have a database created. How can we go ahead and use that database? How does MySQL know which database we want to use whenever we write creating tables and stuff like that? Because we have many databases right here. So how do we go ahead and specify to MySQL which database we want to use? So you can just say use, and then you can say use, and then you pass in the name of the database that you want to use. And this one we say YouTube and then tutorial. So YouTube tutorial, just like that, tutorial DB, just like that. So this means basically we are telling MySQL that we want to use the YouTube database tutorial, which is the one that we YouTube tutorial database, which is the one that we created above here. So we can just go ahead and click on the line and then simply execute this command. Now you can see it has been executed successfully. So now according to MySQL, any command that you're going to be writing from now on is going to be applied to this specific database. Okay, and that's how you can tell MySQL which database you want to use. So now we have learned how to create a database. We have learned how to view database inside of our system, and then we have also learned how to specify to tell MySQL which database it is that you're interested in using. So now what I want to go ahead and do is I want to teach you how you can go ahead and drop a given database. So you can say drop database, and then you can go ahead and pass in the database that you want to drop. So you can say we want to drop. So you can say drop database, and you can say pass in the name of that database right here, and that's going to go ahead and simply drop this database. Okay. So you can simply also use here if not, if you can say if exists. So like this. So this will just prevent any errors from happening in case the database doesn't exist. So if it exists, then it's going to drop it, else it's not going to drop it. It's going to skip over this. So you can also remove this if statement if you don't want. So you can say drop database and then the name of the database you want to drop. Okay. So once I have this, I can simply click on this and simply run the code, and this is going to go ahead and drop that database. And if you look here, if I refresh on my file right here, you can see that database doesn't exist anymore, and I can check the system to see all the databases, and you can see here the database is not in our system. So if you check here, it doesn't exist right here. Okay, so that's basically how we can use the data, how we can view all the data instead of view all the database instead of our system, be able to create our own database, be able to specify which database we want to use, and be able to drop the different tables that you are interested in dropping, right? So that's basically it. So now we have learned how to create databases, to drop tables, to drop databases, and to specify which database we want to use, and to show all the existing databases for our system, right? So now I want to go ahead and let's look at how to insert data inside of our database, which is going to be step 2 right here. How can we insert data inside of our database? Because if you go back in here, we have our database created. So if I just refresh, I can run this code again to create our database. So I can just go ahead, run the code again. That's going to go ahead and create our database. And if I refresh here, you can see it has popped up here. So you can tell which database you want to use. You can just run that, and then you can say you can drop a database if you want. But in this case, you don't want to drop a database, so it's best to comment out this code just to prevent you from running the code accidentally. And you can just press shift and then // on your keyboard. That should now put a comment. But to do this in the better way, you just go in here and just say first like this, and this is going to make this whole line a comment. Okay, so that's how you can create a comment in MySQL. So now we have a comment created right there. So I'm going to go ahead and simply, you can actually go ahead and simply save this if you want. So you can just say save and then specify where you want to save it, and that should save it for you. So you can give it a name and then click on save, and also choose which folder, under which folder you want to store it. Okay. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to go ahead and click on this right here, and it's going to go ahead and simply create for me a new SQL file that I can use. So in here, I want to go ahead. Let me just zoom in again. So in here, I want to go ahead and specify which database I want to use. Okay, so I'm going to say use DB. So I'm going to copy this code right here and simply paste it right here. So I'm just saying use YouTube tutorial database. So we're going to be using this database, so I can just go ahead and simply run this line. So to make sure that your cursor is here and then run this line, or you can just simply go here and run this line as well, and that should also run that for you. Okay, so this is used when you want to write a specific line on which the cursor is on, and this is used to run all the code, every line of code. Okay, so what our objective here is to want to learn how to insert the data into our database. Now we have our database created, right? But instead of our database, if you look down here, we don't have any table. So this is a relational database, right? Because MySQL server or MySQL is a relational database management system. We have other non-relational databases such as MongoDB and others. Also, I think can't remember. I think Redis is also non-relational database, but MySQL is a relational database management system. So in here we need to go ahead and set a couple of tables. So let's go ahead and I'm just going to go ahead and create a simple table, and this table we're going to simply call this table we can call this table just the student detail table that we're going to use to store the student information inside of this table. So you just go ahead and simply type in the following. We're just going to go ahead and create a simple student table. So we're going to say we're just simply going to go ahead and simply say notice you have chosen which database you want to use. So we're going to go ahead and create a table, and this is how you can create a table in MySQL. So we're going to say create. So I'm going to use uppercase because it's a keyword. So create, and I'm going to say table, and the table you can say if not exists. So create a table if it doesn't exist already. So what name do you want to give to this table? And I'm going to call this table student details. So student details, just like this. So we have student detail, let's call it student detail, and then we can have opening and closing parentheses and end that with a semicolon. So in here, that's where we write our code, okay, on which on how many columns that we want to have for our table. So now we have a table. Now we want to specify the columns of this table. So you're going to say you're going to have an ID column that is going to be unique to each student. Each student can be having a unique ID. So we're going to be storing the unique ID instead of the ID column. So it's going to be of type integer. So remember we said the data type. So it's going to be of type integer. You're going to say is a primary key. So remember we studied primary key, which is uniquely used to identify each row instead of a given table. So we say primary key, and we're going to say auto underscore increment. So auto increment is going to increment automatically without us having to specify it. So if you have a student with an ID of 1, the next one to have an ID of 2, the next one have an ID of 3 without us having to specify the ID, and that's what auto increment does. So we have the ID, the ID column. Now we also have, I want to also store the student's first name. So I'm going to say first name, and this is going to be of type a variable character. Remember we studied variable character when you're looking at the data types. So we're going to say the student first name should not be more than 20 characters. And we can say that it shouldn't be null. So we also studied that we look at what not null is, means that this column cannot be blank, means the student must have a first name. Okay. So now let's look at second name. And second name is going to be we're going to say varchar, and you're going to say also not more than 20 characters, and it's not null. And let's say the second name of each student must be unique, because typically the second name is probably the name of like the family. So we're going to say second name is going to be 20 characters, not null, and it's going to be unique, just like that. So just that we have it right here. And then you're going to have the home address of the kid. So we're going to say home address, so home address. And the home address is going to be variable character. It's going to be, let's say, 30 characters. Okay, 30 characters long, and you're going to say not null. And yeah, you're not going to use unique because two people can be staying the same home address, so it's not going to be unique. So let's look at now I'm also going to store the parent phone. So the parent phone, and the parent phone is just going to be a variable character. And let's say the phone is not be more than 13, I would say 14 characters. You can say not null, and you can leave it not to be. It can be duplicated, because two students can be belonging to the same parent, right? So they can have the same phone number of that specific parent. So that's basically how we can create a table. So now that we have created a table, we can go ahead and simply execute this code to add to add a table to our database. So you can see right now we don't have any table. So if I go ahead and execute this, now we can see it has been successful. So if I go in here and just click on this tiny refresh button, now you can see we have one table, which is a student detail table, the detail table, which is what you have specified right here. And if I expand it, I can see the columns. In the columns, you have ID, first name, second name, home address, and then the phone, the parent's phone address. So that's basically the different columns that we have for that specific table. So great, that's basically it, how we can create a table. So now we have learned how to create a database, how to create tables, and all that information. So now let's learn how to insert data inside of this table. Okay, how do we insert the data inside of this table? Because this table already exists. Now how do we insert data inside of it? Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and create a new MySQL file, and in here I'm going to go ahead and simply say that I want to specify which database I'm going to be working with. Let me just zoom in so that you guys can see that. So I'm going to paste it there. So I want to use the student tutorial database. So I want to use this right here. Okay, YouTube tutorial database. So once I have that done, I'm going to simply say insert, write an insert statement. This is how you insert data into a table in MySQL. So you can say insert and then insert into, and then you want to insert into what table? You want to insert into the student detail table. So student detail, and student detail is the detail that is the table that we have here. So we're going to be inserting data inside of the student detail table. Okay, so I'm going to insert data inside of the student detail table. And in which order do we want to insert this? Now we can specify this, or we can not specify this. Okay, so let me just explain to you. If you don't understand this, just bear with me. I'll explain to you just in a second. So we're going to say values, and you're going to use a parenthesis right here. So we're going to specify which values you want to inside of the student table. So the first field is the ID field. So since you have said auto increment, then you don't have to provide the ID field. So you can just say now. Okay, so you can say simply it's gonna be now. So you can just simply go in here and simply say it's going to be now. So the student ID is gonna be now. Okay, and what's next is after the student ID is the first name, the second name. So let's go ahead and pass in those first name, and let me just go ahead and say John. Let me just say John, and then the second name is gonna be Doe. Okay, and what's so we have the first name, the second name, and then we have the home address and the parent phone. So the home address is going to be a string, a variable character. So I'm going to say I'm just currently living in Nairobi, so I'm going to say Nairobi, and then 2222. Okay, just a random number, and then you can pass in the telephone address. I'm going to say plus 254, which is the code for Kenya. So just pass in some random numbers, and then that's it. So once we run this code, it's going to insert a row instead of our data, instead of our student details table, and the ID of is going to be now. And since we have auto increment specified, then it's going to be defaulted to 1. Then you have the first name, the second name, the home address, and then the parent contact details. So if I just select this and execute this, so that has been successful. So once we have this, you can see now our data has been inserted. So how do we actually check if it has really been inserted? So you can just use a select statement. So you can say select star. We can say select everything from the student table. So student details. So in the asterisk means to select everything. So the asterisk stands for everything. So select all rows from the student details table. So if I run this now, we should have only one row, right? Because only we have selected only one data. So if I run this now, it's going to bring for me the output right here. So you can see I have the data already inserted. So the ID has been automatically generated. We have the name John, this first name. The second name is Doe. The city is Nairobi, and then the parent's phone number is as specified right here. So great, that's basically it, how we can set up that specific information, how we can insert data into the database. So there's another way of doing it, which is also another fancy way. So you can say insert into, and then say which table you want to insert into. So we say the student details table, so detail table, and you can specify the value. So they say value, and then you can pass in here. So you can pass in so let me just go back in here. So let's say you're going, since you're not going to pass in since you're not going to be passing in the ID because it's auto increment, you only need to pass in the first name, the last name, the second name, the home address, and then the parent phone. So you can go ahead and specify these things right in here. So you can go ahead and say the first name, so first name, and then we want the second name, so second name, and then we want the first name, the second name, the home address. So if I remember clearly, home address, and then you also want the parent parent phone. So parent phone right here, and then close that off. And then down here you can go ahead and specify the value, and the value is just going to be the phone. So that we're going to go inside of the order that you specified there. So you can pass in, you can change the order if you want. You can start with first, you can start with second name and then first name, or you can even start with home address or even the parent number. The ordering here doesn't matter, but what matters is that the ordering that you specify in here is the ordering is the order in which you should type the name or the information in here. So since I started with the first name, so I need to pass in the first name. So I'm going to say Janet, and then that's going to be the first name, and then the second name is going to be Doe, and then just close off that, and then the home address is going to be, let's say, Nairobi 77333. Okay, just a random number, and then the home the parent number is going to be 254, and then some random number right there, and then close off that. Okay, so great. So once I have this, if I run it, do you think this is gonna be do you think this is gonna be issuing an error or not? Okay. So let's just give you a minute. Take a look at this and tell me if you're going to get an error or not. So take a look at this, and then also take a look at this, and then also yeah, tell me if you're going to have an error or not. Okay. So just take a moment to think about it. Okay, I hope you had enough time to think about it. So let me just execute the code and let's see what happens. So if I execute this, now we get an error, and the error says that the duplicate entry Doe, because here you have Doe for the second name, and also up here you have Doe for the second name. Okay, so since we said that if you go back in here, you can say that the second name is unique, right? So we have two Doe two times. It can be done. It must be unique. So if I go ahead and say two here, and then simply go ahead and execute this, now this should work, and now you can see the data has been inserted successfully. And if I go ahead and run this part of the code, now we should get back the information we have. So we have like this, we have the John Doe, the Nairobi, the phone number, we have Janet Doe, Nairobi, and then that phone number specifically. So we have all that information right there. Okay, so that's basically it. So one thing I need to mention to you is that if you didn't specify the order in which you want to enter the details down here in the value section, then you must follow the order according to the table right here. So, and that's what you see. This part I followed. I said that the ID is going to be null because you're using auto increment, and then I said the first name, which is here, right? First name, and then the second name, and then the home address, and then finally the parent's phone number. So you have to follow that order in case you didn't specify the ordering here. So if you specify the ordering right here, then the ordering depends on you. Yeah, you can order it anyhow you want. Okay, so that's basically it on how to insert data into our database. And you also learn how to retrieve data. Okay, so if I go back in here, you can see we're saying select star from student, which means I told that the asterisk stands for all rows. So select all rows from the student detail, right? So you're going to select all the rows from the student detail, and that's what that basically means. Okay, so if I execute this part of the code, it is going to select all the rows from the student detail table. Okay, good. So once we have this right here, I'm going to go ahead and simply go create another file, and in here I'm going to just zoom in a bit and then specify which data I want to use. So I'm going to copy this and simply paste it in here to tell that we want to use the YouTube tutorial database. Okay, so once I have that specified in there, what I want to go ahead and do is learn how to select state, retrieve the information from the database, right? So if I go back here, you can see retrieve or read information or data from the database. So the first one which we cover is say select. So select, and then asterisk, which is a commonly used one. Select asterisk, and then I'm going to say from student detail. So just like that, and then sorry, I call this table student detail table. Okay, my bad. So once you have that, you can simply run the code, and now it should return to you all the rows of that student detail. Okay, so now you can see all the information down here. So what if I want to select a specific column? So let's say I want to select the student whose ID is 3. So how do I do that? To do that is actually very, very simple. We have to say select star, which is going to be all the columns. So select star from student. So then be student detail. We can use the where clause. Also, we have the where clause. So we can say where the ID is equals to let's say 3. So this is going to select this student right here whose ID is 3, going to be Janet Doe, right? So Janet Doe 2. And then if I go ahead and simply run that, now that should return to me only Janet. So if I say ID equals to 1, it's going to return to me John Doe, right? So if I select this and then run it, you can see now, sorry, if I just run this part right here, now I can only get back John, right? So you can say where ID equals to something. Okay, you can also use any of these columns that you're comfortable with. Okay, let's say that you want to use first name. We're going to say first name is going to be equals to first name, you say John, so this is going to be a string. You're going to go ahead and simply say John, okay, just like that. So once I run this, it's going to return to me all the information about John, where the first name is John. So if I select this, you can see we get back where the first name equals to John. So you can also select where the phone number is this, where the home address is this, where this, the second name is Doe, or anything like that. So that's how you can select data from the database. Okay. Okay, so you can select data. You can use multiple conditions to select data, but since this is a simple tutorial on introduction to MySQL, I'm not going to go ahead and cover all of that. Okay, but if you guys want me to make a more future video on advanced, like a bit advanced, let me know in the comment section below. I'll do my best to get back to you guys. So great, that's how we have learned how to select data or retrieve data from our database. So now let's learn how to update information that exists in our database. Okay, so if you look into our database, let me just bring this table up here. You can see I have the second name as Do2, right? The second name is Do2, and the reason why I use Do2 is because I want us to learn how to update this later on. So let me just go ahead and create a new SQL file, and then just zoom in, and then go in here, select the YouTube tutorial database. So paste that in here, and then once I have that pasted in there, I'm going to go ahead and run this specific code. So I'm going to go ahead and simply say the full names, right? So I'm going to go ahead and let me just run this so you can know which database you're using. Okay, you're using the YouTube tutorial database. So once I have this, I can go ahead and simply say update. All right, you can use the update keyword to update. So you can notice all the keywords are in uppercase, and that's basically it, right? So we can select say update, and then we can update a given part of the code that you want. So you can say update the student table, so the student detail table, so the student detail table, and then simply go ahead and set something. So I'm going to set a keyword. So I'm going to use an uppercase. We're going to set the first. Now this is going to be the second name. The second name is going to be equals to something. So the second name is going to be equals to Doe. Let's say let me just change that name to Tommy. So Tommy. So it's going to be Janet Tommy. Okay. So we're going to say where the ID, or where we can say where the second name is equals to the second name is going to be equals to do 2, right? Do 2, just like that. So basically you're going to be setting the second name of Janet to be Janet, instead of being do 2 to Tommy, where the second name is going to be 2, where the second name is 2. So you're going to go through the whole each row and find where the second name is called do 2, and it's going to update it to Tommy. So now let me just go ahead and simply run this again. So just execute this code. So now we have that executed. So if you go back and try to select everything from our database, so I'm just going to go ahead and run this right here. Now you can see it now has been updated from Do2 to now Tommy. So you can now, that's how you can update any part. So now we just updated the second name. So let's also learn how to update another thing. So you can say update the student detail table, so student detail, and then set let's say that you want to update the phone number. Let's look. Okay, so set is going to be phone, parent phone. So parent phone is going to be equals to, let's say, 255, which is just a Tanzanian number. Okay, so we're going to change from a Kenyan number to a Tanzanian number, where you can say where the first name, okay, where the first name is equals to the first name. You can say let's say John. So when the first name is John, we want to do this update operation of changing the parent phone number to that specific value right here. So once I have this, I can just click on execute. We got an error right there. So it says that let me just look at the error. It says that you are using a save update mode. We are trying to update a table without a where clause that uses a key column to this functional mode. So you can disable this. So is refusing to update this because you're trying to say set the phone parent phone. Let me just check if it's called parent phone. Yeah, it's called parent phone. And then you're going to set the parent phone to be okay, where the first name is John. So we're going to update the parent phone where the second name is John, but if it's refusing to update because it says that you're trying to use where you're trying to without a where that uses a key column. So you're not trying to use a key column. So one way you can go around this is simply go ahead and simply say where the ID is going to be equals to John's ID, and John's ID was 1 if I remember clearly. So now let's try to run this and let's see if that error goes away. So now you can see now it has been updated, but now we're updating it using the ID key, which is a primary key, which is used uniquely to identify each column. And the reason why this is the case is because we need a unique identity to identify to update a given row. So that's why you have to use a unique identity. If you not if you're not if you don't want to do that, then you can turn off the save method, okay, which I'm not going to show in this video. So now if I go back into our select part and then try to select everything from the table, now we have this information right here. We have John. You can see that the numbers have been updated to the one that we specified up here. So great, all that works as we expected to. So we've learned how to update information to which column that you want to update information from. So that's a simple way to update information in MySQL. So we have learned how to update information. Now, one thing before we move on to deleting information, deleting data, is I want to go back to the select part. So we have been using asterisk right here. What if you don't want to select all the individual columns, like you have first name column, the second name column, the home address column, and then the parent column? What if you just want to select the first name and the second name column? So to do that, you have to say first name, first name right here, and you say also second name, just like that. So you can pass in the first name and the second name, and this is going to go ahead and select the only the first name and second name where the first name is Joe, is this one. So if you want to select for all of them, you can just use this and then simply run the code right here, and it's going to return for us all the students, but only their first and the second name, which is not select first name and second name. Let's just undo this. Select first name, second name from student detail where the ID is 1. So I'm just go ahead and simply run this code again. So running, now we get back only the first name and the second name. You can also use this for Jane, so you can say Jane right here. I think it's Jan or Janet, I said. So just run this code, run the code again. So it also returned for us the Janet where the first name is Tommy and then that specific one. So that's basically it, how we can select different columns from our database. Yeah, so we can also select the first name, the second name, and the home address from this. If I go back in here, if I don't want the where clause, that shouldn't give me an error. I wonder why it's returning to us everything. Okay, now it works. So it returns to us the first and the second. Okay, the first column and the second column for the first column and the second column, but for all the rows, right? So yeah, that's basically it, how you can that's what I wanted to talk about. So we have learned how to select data, how to update data, and how to insert data. Now let's learn on how to delete data from our database. So let's just create a new MySQL file right here, and I'm going to use this to show you how to delete data from that specific database. So I'm going to go ahead and select this right here. I'm going to copy it, move it in here, and then paste it in here, and then simply go ahead and simply run the code. So once I have that code run, I have run the code successfully. So now I'm going to go ahead and simply update the information. Okay, show you how to delete information. So to delete information is quite easy. You just have to go ahead and specify that you want to use the database, which you have done right here, the YouTube tutorial database. And I want to go ahead and simply say delete right here. So delete a keyword. So I'm going to say delete, and I want to delete from. So I'm going to say go ahead and say from. So delete from the student detail where. So you can use a where clause. So I want to delete where the ID. You can say where the ID is going to be a specific value. So we say ID where the ID is equals to, let's say ID is 1. So wherever the ID is 1, you're going to go ahead and delete that. So that's the John Doe, the column containing of John Doe information. So if I go ahead and simply execute this code, it's going to delete the information from John Doe. So if I go back and try to run this query again, now we should only see Janet Doe there because we have deleted John Doe. So you can see you have only Janet Doe in there. So that's how you can delete a given row from a table. But what if you want to delete a whole table? So to delete the whole table, you can just use this. You can say drop table. So drop table you can say drop table and then specify the name of the student, the table that you want to draw. So this is going to be student detail. So this is going to go ahead and drop the whole table. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and simply run this again. Now this is going to go ahead and drop the table. So you can see if I go ahead and refresh this here, we don't have any table currently. So we don't have any table inside of our database because we did just deleted the only table that existed. Yeah, so that's basically it. You have learned the basics of SQL, how to create a simple database, how to insert data, how to retrieve or read data from a database, how to update data in a database and stuff like that. So that's basically it for this video. If you guys want me to make much more I know this is actually very simple basic introduction for absolute beginners. If you guys want to make anything more complicated or more advanced on this topic, let me know in the comment section below. I'll do my best to get back to you. So this slide, I've been using SlideGo to make this slide. So thanks to SlideGo. Yeah, so thanks for watching, and if you're new to the channel, please kindly consider subscribing to the YouTube channel, liking this video, and sharing this content with anyone who you think might find it helpful. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Keep safe.